Okay, so Juanita, let's talk about enthusiasm. They've been on a roll. There's no doubt about that. But there were folks in Detroit, black leaders in particular, who had been worried, even in that city, that whether or not they could win. And now one of them describes a mind-blowing level of excitement on par with Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. But look, Detroit is one thing. How do you take that and extrapolate it and make it work in the suburbs, in rural areas?
I think it's all about getting out there and staying out there, Chris, and drawing the contrast to the Trump campaign. Even in the reporting we just heard from Garrett and Yamiche, the contrast is clear. Do you want a campaign of joy and hope or anger? Do you want a campaign of normal or weird, as Governor or Coach Tim Walz put it? Or do you want a campaign that's going to be about protecting your freedoms or Project 2025? That is a message that I fully expect them to continue to drive home everywhere. And that message appeals whether you live in urban areas or suburban areas or rural areas. And that prompts the question that came up in my mind when I heard J.D. Vance's clip about when did a veteran who grew up on a farm in Nebraska become the far left? Right? Like, the attacks are not going to stick from the right, because the worst I've heard them come up with is, oh, Governor Walz has fed children for free at school, and he provides menstrual products for free at school, and he protects LGBTQ individuals and their freedoms. Like, oh, that sounds pretty amazing for a lot of people across this country. And so when I started, I said, stay out there. But this contrast, I think, is going to be the core of and the shape of the message for the next 90 days.
So that's the message. Let me ask you, if I can, Tim, about the messenger, because I think it was just this morning on your podcast, well, at least I listened to it this morning, you said you still think it should have been Josh Shapiro. Okay, make your case, I guess, against Tim Walz. Why is he the bad choice, or why was Shapiro better?
Yeah, look, it's Kamala Harris's choice, not mine. So I'm giving a political analysis. To me, the North Star here was beating Donald Trump. Josh Shapiro had a 61% approval rating in Pennsylvania, and Josh Shapiro won very well in the rural red parts of the state. He won by double digits in his race for governor just 2 years ago, whereas Tim Walz in Minnesota has won in a blue state, but won mostly on the back of doing very well in Minneapolis-St. Paul. So, look, I think that Tim Walz brings some things to the ticket for sure that Shapiro doesn't. I don't know that it's a totally clear call. I think that the contrast with Vance, particularly with regards to what Juanita was talking about, his background, giving back to the community, being a coach, being a veteran, versus somebody that when he came back from being a veteran as well, and J.D. Vance, went to Yale and then signed up for some VCs and sucked up to some rich Silicon Valley guys and wrote a book and got a Hollywood treatment, right? Like the Tim Walz populist economic contrast with J.D. Vance, I think, is very strong and clear. He's also a good messenger, so I think that part's good. I think what's missing now from this ticket, or maybe not missing, but what this ticket's going to have to work on a little harder than they would have had to work on if Josh Shapiro was on the ticket, is how do you make sure to reach out, solidify those center-right voters, the people that were Trump-Biden voters. Those people exist. The people in Georgia, for example, I always use my North Star, that voted for Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, and Raphael Warnock, the Democratic senator. That was about 10% of the electorate in Georgia. So these are real people. And this ticket, I think, can appeal to that voter, but they're going to have to work a little bit harder on their messaging in trying to reach them than they would have, maybe had they gone a more moderate direction with the VP pick. And I think that's, just a calculus that the vice president made based on, balancing the ticket and who she felt most comfortable with.
I think there's no doubt, Juanita, that Tim Walz joins a ticket that was at least full of momentum. And we see it in a new NPR PBS Marist poll. It shows a huge swing among independents for Kamala Harris. She was down 14, now up 9. That's a 23-point swing. What do you think it's all about? And again, how do they keep it going? Because the hardest thing to do with momentum is to keep it.
I think it's all about having an option that you are excited about. You mentioned earlier that this is giving the energy, especially on the fundraising side, of Obama 08. People are excited, and that excitement has been translating not only to donations, but new voter registration. volunteer shifts, campaign mobilizations on the ground. That is how they're going to sustain it, because it seems like when individuals get bought into Vice President Harris and now bought into Governor Walz, they are going to do whatever it takes to win this election. And that's the sustaining energy. And what we do know from the ground game perspective, the Harris campaign has a lot more already in play in terms of campaign offices in battleground states and campaign staffers who have been working for a long time now, even before the change at the top of the ticket, to start to engage voters. And that is something that she is absolutely outpacing Trump and J.D. Vance in, and will continue to outpace them, because all I see on the horizon is additional expansion. The other piece of this momentum that is going to sustain is how that more people see Harris and Walz together on the trail, which puts J.D. Vance at a massive disadvantage. While he's following them around the country, he is alone. But the images of Harris and Walz together on stage, transferring energy to each other, cheering each other on like we saw yesterday and we'll see more of today, laughing at each other's jokes, that is what's going to keep the energy high and people excited, because they like to see that relationship, again, in contrast to what we know is a non-existent partnership right now between Trump and J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is alone. Trump is hiding out. He's only got one event in Montana. And he already said that J.D. Vance doesn't even matter to this ticket. So that is yet another way that this campaign, the Harris-Walz campaign, is going to continue to expand their momentum.
One of the things, and you know this as well as anybody, Tim, that they do at these campaign stops is they blast a lot of music and try to get people to stay awake while they're waiting hours sometimes for the candidate. I'm told that in Eau Claire, folks were just dancing to ABBA and Dancing Queen. I don't know if they're still playing that or they're still dancing. But I think one of the things that the Harris campaign has been doing in a way we haven't necessarily seen from Democrats before is the poking and the prodding. And I can show you one comparison. They compared her crowd size last night, absolutely full at Temple, with his. Much of the upper stands seem to be empty. Do these things, which seem pretty simple and, you know, not tremendously sophisticated, to put it one way, get under Donald Trump's skin, Tim, in a way that will make him react in ways that are not helpful?
Yeah, I do think this matters. So the first question I talked about, the group that she needed to do some work with maybe in the ticket, the center-right swing voters, don't need to do any work with the base voters anymore, or the maybe lesser engaged Democratic voters who Joe Biden was really struggling with. And that ties to the music stuff, really. That's not just silly. Look, they got Bon Iver playing today in Eau Claire. She had Megan Thee Stallion in Atlanta. Beyonce is giving her the theme song. Charlie
Yeah, but you know what Trump says about that, Tim? Then Trump says she needs entertainers to get people to come out.
Yeah, I think that feels like cope to me. Yeah, that feels like a lot of cope. Is that he's upset that her crowds are bigger. There's just a lot of energy, and I think there were a lot of people that it was a big risk a month ago for the Democrats, and some of their own voters were going to stay at home, and that is not a risk anymore. And I think they're bringing in some new voters, younger voters, into this process that were disengaged, and I think that is real. It's a boost, and I think trolling Trump over that and getting under his skin also helps, because it makes him lash out and do a lot of the stupid stuff we've seen him do in the last couple of weeks.